think we have to be very cautious, because when the court was pursuing Putin for crimes against Ukrainian children, which is essentially a form of genocide, we were cheering them on. We were saying, thank you, ICC.
Everybody was on the side.
Indeed, even though Russia is not obviously a signatory to the ICC. The challenge here is that I think a lot of people seem to think that there is essentially equivalence being given between Hamas and the Israeli government. I don't think that's what we're seeing. And what I think is really interesting here is that clearly the prosecutor recognises the sensitivity, and that's why he's asked this group of independent, and I have to say some of the best, legal minds in the world, to give their opinion, which of course they delivered yesterday alongside the arrest warrant request.
And you say there isn't an equivalence because there are two sets of warrants or applications for warrants making two sets of allegations about two different groups of people.
Exactly that. And look, I think I was the first person in the world to say that what Hamas did on the 7th of October was a crime against humanity, because it absolutely was. But they are very different. If you read the judgment, it's very clear. And also if you read out the legal setting out of the request, the arrest warrant, and then also what these independent legal minds have said, they are very different bases for it. And the reality is that the judges will now review the arrest warrants and decide whether to allow them to go forward. And they might not, of course. So I think people are saying, people are being very critical, but I think we do have to have respect for independent institutions. And there is a reason why we have the ICC and why we've been so reliant on it in the past.
The government has been quite cautious in its language. It's talked about this being unhelpful and not helping get aid in, which is unarguable. But at the same time, we have to be careful in this country because we are one of the countries that created the ICC, created The Hague in the first place.
We do, and actually I think our line has been far better than that of some of our partners, for example the US, who've been far more strong in their criticism. But also I think I want to challenge this idea that it's unhelpful, because when you are looking at a crisis, for example Sudan at the moment, El Fasher, where we look like we're about to see appalling crimes against humanity committed, actually launching independent investigation is one of the few tools available to you to try and stop atrocities. And I had Tariq Ahmed, the Minister for the Middle East, in front of my committee last week, and one of the things he said, his exact words were, people are dying in Gaza because of a lack of medicine, a lack of support and a lack of amenities. Now, who has control over those medicine, support and amenities? It is the Israeli government. And that is exactly what the ICC arrest warrant looks at. It talks about starvation. It talks about the impact of withholding and stopping aid. And it uses Gallant and Netanyahu's own words as part of the request.
And so when David Cameron says this is all a mistake, you wouldn't agree with that, would you?
I wouldn't go that far, because I think we have to be very cautious. We cannot in 1 year say that the ICC is absolutely right and herald it as a great success of the independent legal system around the world, and the next say it's not right. I think we have to be very, very cautious. We can, of course, challenge. You can, of course, say you disagree. But I think the way in which you do is important. And I think I have to say the way our government has done it is far more respectful than necessarily others.
And what about the general criticism is that the ICC should not go after, or maybe be able to go after, the ministers of democratically elected governments who are defending their territory, defending their people, as Netanyahu and Gallant say they are?
Across the world, we are seeing, and I'm not saying this is true of Israel, but we are seeing states where democratically elected leaders are going down the hole of autocracy. You cannot say that just because you have been elected, you have the right to pursue whatever you want in any way that you choose. And I think, look, I've been very clear throughout all this. I absolutely support Israel, but I do not support the way in which they have prosecuted this when it comes to proportionality and necessity. And these are exactly the points that are being drawn out by the lawyers. They are not saying that Israel was wrong to go after Hamas. They are not wrong to say that Israel's security, long-term security, relies on getting rid of Hamas, an appalling terrorist group. We need that for all of our stability. But there are also laws around warfare, and that is where the challenge sits.
So as you read these applications for warrants, you wouldn't say there was moral equivalence being made between Israel and Hamas?
Absolutely not. They are completely different issues under which the referrals be made for arrest warrants. And these are two totally different things. And that is why, for example, when we talk about, and I often get asked, Alicia, how can you ask that of Israel, but you're not asking that of Hamas? Hamas is a terrorist group. I expect nothing of them. I do not expect to see them have any value for life or behaviours or international norms-based the rules-based system. I do expect it from Israel.
So again, I think it's Michael Gove used the phrase moral equivalence. And what I see in this is politics coming back into the argument about law.
I don't disagree with you, and I think we have to be very careful. People should read the referrals to the arrest warrants, but they should also read there is a 2-page version that these legal experts have done, as well as the wider report. Please read it. It is important. This is what, my constituents say to me all the time. They don't want a short, hardball, dramatic populist response. They want someone who will say, let's talk about the detail and the specifics. And it may yet be, again, that these arrest warrants are not issued. So it's important that people don't prejudge the outcome.
Let me read to you what Antony Blinken has been saying, because the Americans are being much more vociferous, as you suggested, about the ICC. He says that this is outrageous. This decision does nothing to help and could jeopardize ongoing efforts to reach a ceasefire agreement that would get hostages out and surge humanitarian assistance in. The Americans have a bit of a point, do they? I mean, they're trying to negotiate with Netanyahu. If this creates an atmosphere in Tel Aviv that is ferociously protective and nationalistic, it might be exactly the wrong atmosphere for what's needed now.
And it may result in exactly that. But at the same time, as I said, it's one of those tools that you have as a diplomat that can sometimes change states' behaviours. In the same way, though, as the Americans chose to withhold some of their weapons sales. They did that to try and change the behaviour of the Israeli state. This is exactly what this is. But actually, if you read the judgment, what the judgment says is that the way in which they were choosing to pursue this was actually making it less safe, and that actually the way that they chose to pursue Hamas actually brought us further away from getting more aid in.
And it is clearly an ever more dangerous and turbulent world at the moment. How important is the ICC in this world?
I think it does remain fundamental, and we do need to have an international criminal court because we have to hold states responsible for their actions. Who else will do it if the ICC does not? We cannot live in a world where we say that democratic elected or autocratic states have no one to which they are accountable.
You said a few moments ago, Alicia, that there are some democratically elected governments and states which are verging towards autocracy in how they behave. Would you include Israel in that?
No, so I don't think Israel is showing autocratic behaviours. I do think we have an ultra-Orthodox government. I do think we have a far-right government. I think some of their reforms around the Supreme Court were deeply concerning, and we saw the Israeli population out protesting against that. But I wouldn't say that I would describe it as an autocratic state, no.